Sea of Thieves 2. A sequel, an update, a change? This is something I've seen a lot of people discussing in various spaces, and it's something that at this stage of development, with the game being nearly 7 years old, it's starting to show its cracks. Although Sea of Thieves' stylized graphics are timeless and could potentially survive the onslaught of various high-fidelity games that come in its wake in the coming years, in terms of performance, it's really starting to show some cracks in the woodwork. First of all, let me try and explain to you guys how game engines work. Now, for any professional game or mod developers out there, you'll probably take your seasoned expert pipe out of your mouth and let out a little condescending chortle, but for the rest of us, this is pretty much how it works. Sea of Thieves is running on Unreal Engine 4. In fact, that's not entirely accurate. Sea of Thieves is actually running on a bespoke Unreal Engine 4.2.1003xt.com/org. It's a hybrid, and I don't mean like a badass xenomorph hybrid, I mean more something like this. Like a Shorse or a Hark hybrid. Okay, that's still pretty badass. You see, all game engines suffer from one fundamental problem. They have a limit. This is why new game engines come out, to expand on that limit. Now, I'm not talking about ray tracing, volumetric lighting, frame generation, and all that jazz. I'm talking more on memory limits of the client. And by client, I mean the game client, not the system you are running the game on. Eventually, when a game gets too big for its boots, shortcuts need to be made. Imagine this bin is the game, and every single update, content gets added to the bin. Eventually, the bin starts to overflow, so then they need to compact this bin to let in more content. This process keeps happening and happening until eventually the compacted stuff itself starts to overflow. So then they need to work on new ways to access this compacted information quickly to speed up the already overflowing bin of content. The result is memory stutters, desync, teleporting entities, all the stuff we are seeing in the game right now. This is why the game world itself has not been expanded, but instead things have been thrown on top, or below, as the case is. This is why every single time something gets added to the game, we have to venture below the map. Shrines and skeleton camps as an example, or directly out of the game world. Pirate's Life, Monkey Island Tall Tales, excluding the Coral Fortress, however. That's literally the only map expansion we've seen since the Devil's Roar or the Shores of Gold. I guess you could say Port Merrick's an expansion, but it's not really, it's just stuff, again, put on top. It's like the whole shrine thing. It's the same thing. This is also the reason, I presume, why the Devil's Roar has not been touched in terms of expansion since March 2020, when the Heart of Fire Tall Tale was added. But even with these clever little tricks to help ease the tension of the client, we can already see that cracks are showing, and performance is taking a huge hit. And this is why we haven't seen an update as large as Anniversary Update since, well, Anniversary Update. The game client simply wouldn't be able to handle something of that magnitude ever again. It wouldn't matter how good your system is that runs it, the client itself would literally bottleneck your performance. So what's to be done about that? We can't keep adding content to the content bin, as it'll eventually spill over, and we'll be left with a game that literally does not function.
There's a certain amount of processing power. Every single thing we add eats into that. If we use up all that processing power, the whole experience begins to degrade. And if it runs out of memory, it just crashes dead.
The only move is to update the client and increase that memory cap and move to a new version of Unreal. There was so much stuff that never got added to the game, mainly due to this reason. When you want to create a cross-play environment, you need limitations in place. And as much as you might want to deny it, it is 100% valid that the OG Xbox is the only thing holding us back. Well, I mean that, and a dedicated team of developers who could make a swap to a new engine. It's not an easy thing to do something like that. It's not a matter of just copy and pasting the game client over. It'd literally need to be worked on from the ground up. But with Rare literally building an entirely new game cave at Rare Ltd that allows them to collaborate with different developer teams that they have recently got on board to help solely with the production of Sea of Thieves, Lucid Games, Sprung Studios, Flix Interactive, Arrock Digital, just to name a few, this might be an indication that a change to a new game engine may be on the horizon. But of course, nobody would ever know about it. Something like this would have to remain so secretive, even more so than the Disney crossover. Think about it. If someone got wind that Sea of Thieves was dropping support, or at the very least hitting the pause button on future updates on the OG consoles, they would lose a large majority of their player base the moment it was announced. Not to mention the outcry it would create. It would be a political, game political suicide. Something like this would have to be kept super secret, even from partners such as myself, until the very moment it was ready to be deployed. We wouldn't see insider testing or dev diaries about such a change. It would be a literal hot drop, as an example, announced at a game convention and released on the very same day. The hype train would have to be ridden hard and fast to not only create a massive amount of hype to overshadow the cries of the poor OG console denizens, but also create a literal tidal wave of money as people rush out to upgrade their systems to an Xbox Series X or PlayStation 5 or buy a new PC. Look at the game's development so far. We're in the era of rounding off the corners. Safe servers, on-demand PvE and PvP, expanded trading companies, new tools and weapons that have been hinted at even before the game's release. We're at the point now where everything they wanted to add on the game's release has been added. Now, some would say that's because they're planning on sunlighting the game and stopping support in the future, but Sea of Thieves is the literal flagship for Xbox in this present day. They couldn't afford to lose an IP that is so embedded into its marketing, and they'd have to move on with the times to keep the game rolling out. And with the Unreal Engine 4 being 10 years old, only 1 year younger than the Xbox One release, things have got to change at some point. It's my prediction that at some time soon, maybe not next year, but 2026, we'll see the release of Sea of Thieves Classic, which will be a much more user-friendly version of the current build that will be available on all systems, where all the wonderful things from present day to the release of the game will be available, but updates and support will be paused, and a new breed of Sea of Thieves will make its way onto the next-gen systems, the Xbox Series X, PlayStation 5 and PC, where the game will expand with a new memory cap, allowing larger servers, more players, expanded worlds and tools, expanded graphical improvements, and a whole host of other things. So watch this space, because it's not something they'd even hint toward before it was ready to go. Thanks for watching, peeps. Don't forget to thumb me up that thingy and splatter doodah on the subby snapper, and I'll see you all soon. But before I go, what happened to the Xbox One logo on the website?